You did this!
No, I didn't!
Wait, please. Don't lie to me!
I'm sorry. Stop, please, listen to me.
Who the hell is he? Boss, shut your mouth!
Isn't what you think.
I caught you on my couch! Please don't call the police. Get out of my house! Don't throw our marriage away! You threw it away!
Sorry.
Sorry won't save you!
Please, don't ruin his life.
His life? He's my employee! You're both finished!
No, please!
By Monday, you'll lose your husband and he'll lose his job! Please don't do this! Too late.
I came home 3 hours early on a Friday. Not because I suspected anything. Because a meeting had been canceled last minute and the office felt pointless without it, and I had been working 12-hour days for 3 consecutive weeks, and the idea of going home early and doing nothing for 3 hours felt like the most appealing thing in the world. I parked outside the house. I sat in the car for a moment, finishing a podcast. The house looked exactly the way it always looked from the outside. Lights on downstairs, curtains open in the living room. The potted plants by the front door that my wife Folake tended with the specific devotion she gave to things she cared about. I turned off the podcast. I got out of the car. The front door was unlocked, which was not unusual. I pushed it open. I stepped into the hallway. I could hear music playing from the living room, the particular playlist Folake played on weekend evenings when she was relaxed and happy, soft and familiar. Then I heard her laugh. Not the television. Her. The specific laugh I had been hearing for 7 years. The laugh I knew better than any sound in the world. And then a voice that was not the television and was not mine. I stood in the hallway for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds of my brain insisting that there was an innocent explanation. A friend visiting, a cousin dropping by, something ordinary and unremarkable that would resolve itself into nothing significant the moment I walked through that door. Then I walked through that door. Folake was on the sofa. The man beside her was named Rotimi. I knew this because Rotimi worked in my company. Because Rotimi had been hired by me personally 18 months ago. Because Rotimi had sat across from me in a job interview and told me he was hardworking and trustworthy, and I had believed him and given him a salary and a position and access to the building where I spent most of my waking hours. They separated the moment I walked in, both of them on their feet. Folake's face going through 5 expressions in 2 seconds. Rotimi taking 1 step backward and then stopping because there was nowhere useful to go. I looked at them both. I said nothing. I turned around and walked back into the hallway. I picked up my car keys from the table where I had just placed them. I walked out of the front door. I got in my car. I drove to the end of the street. I parked. And I sat there and I made 4 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer. The second was to my HR director. The third was to my accountant. The fourth was to my brother. By the time I drove back to the house 40 minutes later, I had already begun the process of making sure that what I had just seen in my living room would cost Folake and Rotimi everything they had spent the last 18 months building together on top of the ruins of my trust. Let me tell you about Folake first, because she was not a villain when I married her. She was a woman I loved completely and had built a life with and trusted in the way you trust someone who has given you no reason not to. 7 years. No children yet. We had been planning. The conversations had been happening. We had been in the particular hopeful phase of 2 people who have decided the time is right. I had been happy. Genuinely, without performance. Happy. I had also been working too much. I acknowledge this because honesty requires it, and because the truth of a situation rarely lives entirely on one side. The 12-hour days have been going on for months. The canceled weekends, the dinners eaten at the office, the particular way I had been physically present in our marriage while being mentally elsewhere. None of this is justification. I want to be clear about that. There is no version of coming home and finding your employee on your sofa with your wife that constitutes a reasonable response to a husband who works too hard. People who are unhappy in marriages talk to their partners or go to counseling or, in the worst case, ask for a divorce. They do not conduct an 18-month situation with a man their husband hired. I acknowledge the 12-hour days. I do not accept the responsibility for what she chose. Now let me tell you what the 4 phone calls set in motion. He did not shout. He did not confront them. He made 4 phone calls. And those 4 calls were the beginning of the most calculated response you have ever heard. Stay right here. Subscribe to Whispered Confessions right now if you are new here. Turn on notifications. Hit that bell. Because what comes next is something else entirely. My lawyer's name was Mrs. Addis Phillip. I had used her for business matters for 4 years, and she was the sharpest person I knew in a professional context. When I called her from the end of my street and told her what I had just walked into, she asked me 2 questions. She asked if we had a prenuptial agreement, and she asked if the house was jointly owned. The prenuptial agreement existed. Folake had signed it before the wedding at the insistence of my father, who had built enough in his lifetime to be cautious about its protection. The agreement contained a fidelity clause, standard language that I had not thought about once in 7 years of a marriage I believed was faithful. The clause was clear. In the event of proven infidelity, the financial provisions of the divorce settlement would be significantly altered in favor of the non-offending party. The house was in my name. I had bought it before the marriage. It had never been transferred to joint ownership. Mrs. Phillip told me to document everything I could before confronting anyone. She told me specifically not to confront Folake that evening. She told me to go back into that house, behave normally, and let her begin the legal groundwork before anything was said that could complicate the process. I drove back to the house. Folake was alone when I came in. Rotimi had apparently left through the back garden with the specific speed of a man who understands that remaining in a location is not in his interest. Folake was standing in the kitchen with a glass of water that she was not drinking, holding it in both hands like it was something to hold on to. She started to speak. I held up one hand. I said, "Not tonight." "We are not doing this tonight." I went upstairs. I showered. I got into bed. I lay in the dark beside a woman I no longer recognized, and I breathed at a normal rate, and I thought about everything Mrs. Phillip had told me. Document everything. I started the next morning. Over the following 11 days, I did what Mrs. Phillip had advised with the methodical patience of a man who has decided that the outcome matters more than the release of confrontation. I retrieved phone records. I spoke to 2 colleagues who had apparently been aware of the situation for several months and who, presented with the reality that it was over and the question of whether they were willing to provide statements, agreed that they were. I gathered what was needed with the specific care of someone building a case rather than nursing a wound. At work, I was professional. Rotimi continued coming to the office every day with the uncertain energy of a man who does not know what his employer knows and is trying to read every interaction for clues. I gave him nothing to read. I was pleasant and direct and gave him no indication that anything had changed. On the 11th day, I called him into my office. I closed the door. I placed the HR termination document on the desk in front of him. I placed beside it a printed copy of the company's conduct policy, which he had signed on his first day of employment, and which contained explicit language about relationships with the families of senior management. I placed beside that the statements from 2 colleagues. I told him his employment was terminated with immediate effect for gross misconduct. I told him his access to all company systems had been revoked as of that morning. I told him security would escort him from the building once our meeting was concluded. He tried to speak. I told him there was nothing he could say that I was interested in hearing. I told him he could take the matter to an employment tribunal if he believed the termination was unjust, and that my legal team would be delighted to present the full evidence in that forum. He did not take it to a tribunal. He collected his personal items from his desk under security escort and left the building, and I watched him go from my office window with the particular expression of a man who has completed one item on a list and is moving to the next. That evening, I came home and sat down with Folake at the kitchen table and told her that our marriage was over. She had been expecting it. I could see that. The 11 days of my silence had not been the silence of someone who had processed what he saw and arrived at forgiveness. She had been living inside the specific dread of someone waiting for the other shoe, and the shoe had now landed. She cried. She apologized. She said she had ended it. She said she had been trying to find a way to tell me. She said she wanted to save the marriage. She reached for my hand. I placed Mrs. Phillips' initial divorce filing on the table in front of her. I told her the prenuptial agreement was being invoked. I told her the house would remain mine as it had always legally been. I told her the financial provision she had been expecting from the marriage assets would be significantly reduced under the fidelity clause she had signed before the wedding. She looked at the document. Then she looked at me. She said she did not know about the fidelity clause. She said she had not read the prenuptial agreement carefully. She said she had just signed what was put in front of her. I said, I know. The divorce took 8 months. Folake's lawyer contested the fidelity clause aggressively, and for a period of approximately 6 weeks, the process was loud and combative in the way of things contested by people who believe they have something to recover. Mrs. Phillip addressed every contestation with the calm efficiency of someone who has the evidence and knows it. The fidelity clause held. The house remained mine. The financial settlement reflected what the prenuptial agreement said it would reflect in the circumstances. Folake moved out in the spring. She took what was legally and agreed to be hers, and she left. I watched her car disappear down the street from the same window where I had watched Rotimi leave the office building 6 months earlier, and I felt, in that moment, something I had not expected to feel. Not triumph, not satisfaction, not the particular vindication of a man who has been wronged and has watched the wrongdoer face consequence. Just quiet. The specific quiet of something being over, of a chapter closing not with drama, but with the simple finality of a last page. I went back inside. I made myself dinner. I sat at my own table in my own house and I ate it. And I thought about what came next. What came next was mine to decide. Entirely mine. No negotiation required. No compromise necessary. No accommodation of another person's preferences or habits, or the particular ways that sharing a life with someone reshapes you around them. I repainted the living room. I moved the furniture. I took down things that had been there for 7 years and replaced them with things that were entirely my choice. I put the potted plants from the front door in the back garden because I had never liked them there and had simply not said so. Small things. Individually insignificant. Together, the architecture of a life reclaimed. Rotimi, I heard through a colleague 6 months later, had moved to another city. Whether he carried what he had done with the weight it deserved, or had found a way to arrange it into something more comfortable in his own telling, I did not know, and did not particularly need to know. Folake. I did not hear about directly. She had her life to build. I had mine. People ask me if I regret the way I handled it, if I should have confronted them that evening, if the calculated response was cold, if a man who loved his wife should have fought harder for the marriage. I tell them this. I came home early on a Friday because I wanted 3 hours of nothing. What I got instead was everything I needed to know about the life I had been living. I made 4 phone calls, and I built a case, and I protected what was mine, and I let the law do what it was designed to do. I did not shout. I did not beg. I did not give either of them the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. I planned. I executed. I moved forward. Some people call that cold. I call it knowing what you are worth and refusing to accept less. He came home early, made 4 calls, said almost nothing, and dismantled everything they had built on top of his trust piece by piece without raising his voice once. Drop a comment below. Did he handle it right, or was he too calculated? Subscribe to Whispered Confessions right now. Share this today. Next week, we have something that will completely floor you. I will see you then.